I studied geography and history, primarily in high school, and I was at university where a range of opportunities presented themselves, and archaeology seemed to me to represent a combination of field-based studies that one might derive from geography in combination with history, that is something to do with trying to understand the past. Archaeology seemed to bring together both of those interest areas for me. After high school, I went for a trip overseas and I found myself in a little town in Cornwall called Mousehole, and I went over to visit a standing stone circle. And when I saw that standing stone circle, there was something about it that fascinated me, that led me to realise that there was a whole world out there, and this particular world there being something to do with the past, where people had created a whole range of things, places, landscapes, for various reasons that were difficult for us to understand in the present day. And I was inspired then to think more about that, and that's what led me to archaeology. I'm involved in a range of research projects. Mostly I'm interested in the way that people in the past adapted to particularly difficult environments. And in Papua New Guinea, where my primary research area is, there's a number of different case studies that draw out information, that we can draw information from, that allow us then to see the way that people adapted. In particular, we've recently published a paper in Science on some work at a place called Kossipi, where we can see the earliest evidence of Homo sapiens sapiens, modern human beings, moving into and adapting to high altitude environments. And this is really exciting, cutting edge study. There's also other aspects of human adaptation which are really interesting too, and I've been involved in a study in an island off the east coast of Papua New Guinea called New Ireland, where they have a relatively depauperate range of mammal species, land-based prey species. So thinking back 40,000 years ago, there were relatively few land-based animals for people to hunt, and of course protein is fundamental. There were of course fish available in the sea, but fish require particular kinds of technology to catch. So what we see here then is a range of strategies to adapt to an environment which was relatively poor in protein species. So here we see yet again another example of how people have adapted to difficult sorts of environments. And the third project that I've been working on is on the Papuan coast, just outside of Port Moresby, where we see there's a dramatic change in environment, a seasonality of environment, where there's a very long dry period. And over the last 2,900 years, we've seen the slow but continuous development of a dramatic trade and exchange network called the Hiri, where local Motuans built massive canoes called lakatoi and built hundreds of, tens of thousands of pots and sailed these pots up to the Gulf area where they were exchanged for sago. And the sago, which they then sailed back with sago to their home villages and dispersed this sago amongst local villages in order to sustain themselves during this dramatic dry period. So once again, it's an example of how people have adapted to a particularly difficult environment.